And I think financial stress can also cause like the most emotional and mental strain, because again, it creates so much uncertainty, and there's already a lot of uncertainty that happens within business anyway. So for me, the biggest sacrifice has been pretty much letting go and abandoning that structure of I work, I get paid at the end of every month. That by far has been like the biggest struggle. I think the second one has been, like I said, abandoning the vision of I can work part-time, because this is the first time working for myself is the first time that I have worked full-time hours. When I first went full-time, every 2.5 to 3 months I would burn out. I would just be completely tapped out, and it would take a week for me to like really physically and emotionally recover. And then I would go at it again. And so I've had to find a way of creating a sense of balance, because otherwise your body just will tap out.
Jade, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a busy week.
I'm so excited about this topic. I have so many thoughts, and I can't wait to hear yours. Before we get into it, though, where are your people from?
And have always been in London, in the UK. My family is what I like to say the best of both worlds. So my dad's side of the family is Nigerian. My mum's side of the family is Jamaican. But we have like very much a mix of like half of my family were born here, half of them were born in other parts of the world. And then we've got also family living in the States. We're kind of a mix of everywhere, you know. But that's what I love about it, because we have people from all corners of the world in our family. So it means that I get to learn a lot from them as well.
So today we're talking about pain. Front end pain versus back end pain in the most professional way possible. I don't want nobody to interpret that how they should not be interpreting that. But also if you do interpret it that way, that's kind of okay too. Like, do you, Bo? Do you? And really talking about, I was going to use the word sacrifice, but more of this just understanding that whatever you do in life that is worth it, you really have to take stock and prioritize. Am I going to take the beating up front, or can I possibly take it behind? How much effort do I want to put in this? My first question to you was, when did you start learning about this concept of like front end work versus back end work? Or if I put in a lot of effort in the front, I may or may not have as many regrets in the back when it's done.
I think I've been very fortunate to learn that lesson young, because I spent a lot of my time doing track and field. So since I was maybe about 11-ish years old. And so for those that aren't like super familiar with track, you've got like winter season, which is when you do all of the horrible stuff that makes you want to not go training and cry. And then, yeah, it's all of the work that you do so that you run fast in the summer, or you perform well in the summer if you're like a jumper or a thrower.
So it's the hard stuff. It's the hard stuff. Yeah. It's the conditioning and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the conditioning. It's like the longer runs, the harder drills, more reps. If you're doing weights, heavier weights, that kind of thing. So it's all of what I would describe as the type of training most people don't enjoy, which is the really grueling stuff, happens in the winter. But then on the flip side, by the time you're ready to race, all of that conditioning has paid off, all of that speed work has paid off if you're consistent and you keep up at it and you actually do what your coach has told you to do, you know? So I think from quite an early age, when I had my first full winter, because it gets to a point where, you know, as a kid, you might train twice a week. And then it gets to a point where you start transitioning to what feels like more of a full-time program. So when you're like training 4 or 5 times a week and you're having to balance that with school or university or whatever else it is that you're doing. And at that point, winter then starts to feel very different, because then you're like, oh, this is hardcore. I'm at the track for like 4 hours. Half of this stuff is not fun. Kind of training starts to happen then. And it was when I started doing that I was like, oh, I'm actually seeing what I've done in the winter is now paying off when I go to race. And it was that was when I started to realize, oh, okay, so doing all the things that I didn't want to do, because who really wants to do like 10 reps of anything? Who you off of like 3 minutes recovery. Nobody wants to do that. It's not fun, you know? So, and I also don't naturally have a lot of endurance. I have a lot of strength. So different people, again, they play to different strengths. Naturally quite strong. My endurance is naturally quite cool. So the moment you're making me do anything with less than 5 minutes recovery, I'm dying on the inside. And that's a lot of what it is in the winter. So for me, it was seeing that difference between, oh, okay, if I put in the work now, it will pay off later, even if I don't know exactly when later is, you know, because you know that you're going to race, but you don't know the race that you're going to run a PB. You know, you don't know the race that you're going to get a medal. You just know that you're going to go and race. And at some point you will start to notably feel and see the difference in your performance. And so that I've carried a lot of that with me. So I'm not afraid to do the work up front if it means that will lead to a better outcome later. And I've basically made that stay with me throughout a lot of my career. And I think that's why I've also enjoyed a lot of my career as well.
I'm not a track star, even though I did see the Netflix documentary Sprint. And so in my head, I'm a track star. Like in my head, of course, I could fight Usain Bolt. Shout out to Usain Bolt. Like, I got you, fam, in my head. But growing up for me, I learned the exact same lesson. I was a musical theater kid, which I would argue is very similar to athletics. And I remember for almost 6 summers, I performed at America's largest outdoor theater, and they had a show every week in the summer, which means we had to practice in the spring. And so having 10-hour practices on the weekends and then 6-hour practices throughout the week, they probably require us to have more practice. But you know, child labor laws is a thing. Having to be out in 100-degree heat in the Midwest in St. Louis in 4-inch heels for 8 hours a day. And that's when I learned the same lesson that you learned in track, was that number one, this sucks. No one likes it. And for people who say they do, they're lying. But number two, for me, I was always asking myself, is it worth it? Because I knew the pot of gold that I get at the end, which is a phenomenal performance. And every time I performed, I would always check in with myself and be like, was that worth it? My next question to you is, what did it feel like once you did all this grueling work in London in the winter? I'm gonna talk about y'all. Like, London in the summer is questionable weather. So London in the winter is wild. So having to get up early, go through all that, right? As I tell people, Black people aren't made for that weather. It's very clear, okay? But then in the summertime, when you received the reward, was it worth it? What did that feel like?
For me, I'm also very ambitious. So I was never just like, oh, it's not enough that I want to go to a championship and get a medal. I was like, no, I want to run fast, because you can get a medal and your time can be trash. A lot of people are very fixated on, but if you've got the medal, no one can take that away from you. Whereas if you run like a record, somebody can come and beat that in a year, in a month, in 10 years. And I'm like, I hear you, but I want the time. So for me, it was, I actually went to a race in Italy, and that was when I ran probably the fastest 1 and 2 that I think I had run at the time. Yeah, it was in Italy, and I just remember at the end of the race being like, oh, that actually felt easy. And I'd run the fastest I'd ever run. So I was like, oh,
It's a walk in the park in Venice. You're like, oh, y'all, you slow. Like,
but I was like, oh, my conditioning is so much better that was my fastest run and it felt easy. So I think that was probably the moment where I felt like, oh, okay, this feels really good to know that my body is in this place. And it was just like the self-recognition that feels worth it, because I can physically feel the difference between the way that I have performed in the past and the way that I perform now. It makes a huge difference to be able to not just see the time on a clock, but then also to physically feel the difference within yourself as well. So I think that was it for me, at least in terms of sport. But in terms of like life, I think one of the things that I have always prioritized is training. So even when I graduated, I actually have never, up until the point that I started working for myself a year and a half ago, I had never worked full time. I'd worked every job that I'd worked.
But you can do that in this economy?
You can do it. It is possible. And I worked maybe like 2/3 of full-time hours, got almost to the top of my, like, the ladder in the area that I was in, which was marketing, before I went off and started working for myself. By the time I got to the end of it, I was making double the salary that the average person makes, and I was working 2/3 of the hours. What I also don't regret is the front end pain of I had to put myself in a position where that outcome was possible. And that wasn't easy, but what it meant is that I made less money than most people to begin with, because you're starting off in an entry-level job and then you're working 2/3 of the full-time hours. And as most people know, entry-level jobs pay sucks. So your first job, unless you're going in something like investment banking, you're not getting paid that much. But again, it was that front end.
And I would argue even in investment banking, you're not getting paid that much compared to the top wigs of it. Like, it's all a spectrum, right? And even in investment banking, you are still getting paid shit compared to the senior investment bankers, and you're working more hours. So you're still paying your dues. You're still paying your dues.
That's true. And I think for me, it was that at the beginning, I had to take the financial hit of, okay, I'm making 30% less than I could, and it's entry level, but in the long term, I'm going to be able to train as often as I need to train because I negotiated my hours around training. I'm going to be able to do the other things that I want to do outside of work, and I'm going to be able to build up my career in marketing at the same time. So I can build a career in a space that I'm really interested in, and I can continue to train. Again, fast forward to, I say, like 8 years later, I was again making double what the average person was making, working 30 hours a week, still training. Well, less than 30 hours a week, sorry. Still training and still being able to perform on the track as well. So it's, again, it was the pain of having to set my life up in a way that was meaningful to me, that wasn't necessarily the way that everybody else was doing it. Most people are not going to choose to work part-time and make less money. But I would rather work part-time and have the flexibility and have my time back to be able to do the other things that I love.
I think what you're also talking about directly is this idea of like long-term gain versus short-term sacrifice. And I also believe, especially in the social media age, bear with me, sis, I'm gonna go there, is that a lot of people do not want to navigate the short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain, because on social media, all they see is the long-term gain. And so because we don't discuss enough with people about, well, what it took to get there, we have this generation of people that may or may not be like, okay, I'm going to be in the rain running 18 miles around Buckingham Palace every day. They may or may not get pneumonia and half die, because we live in this very encompassed world where social media is law, and you get to decide what you're curating on your social media. That's why I love documentaries. I'm a documentary fiend, because I really believe that documentaries, if you watch the right ones, and if they're, in my opinion, done correctly, you see the sacrifice for the long-term gain. And that's where the sacrifice is where greatness is created.
Because also the sacrifice is where you learn far more about yourself when you're in that position, right? Because you're you're going through the discomfort. So you have to learn how to be very uncomfortable doing the things that you don't want to do. But it then it allows you to create a mindset whereby you don't care about how you feel towards a task. You just care about getting it done. And that, I think, is a much more useful position to come from than, oh, I don't like it, I don't want to do it, which I think is, again, an attitude that people take up a lot nowadays, kind of in the guise of, do what feels right to you, or, you don't have to sacrifice all the time. And I'm like, well, no, actually, some things just need to be done. And we can't sit here and complain about everything. So let's channel our energy into doing things that need to be done and complaining about things that are worth complaining about. that actually have a significant impact on our lives or the lives of other people. So I think going through that process has allowed me to some extent be able to say, I don't like it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it needs to be done.
Have you heard of this new trend, called the soft life?
Yeah.
I have a lot of layered sentiments about this trend. One, do I think that people deserve soft lives? I do. That's the foundation of it. Two, do I think that we don't discuss enough with people, especially this upcoming generation, that in order to have a soft life, you have to have a hard one first?
Yeah.
We don't discuss that with them. And you know what? Maybe some people do. And blessings to those people. But the majority of earthling folk, and I told a mentee this a few days ago, is I was like, sis, you're not going to have a soft life until you have a harder one. You have to work for the softness. So how does this concept and idea, maybe not of soft life, but about you have to work hard for the things that you want. And once you define those things, that is your definition of softness and peace and power. How does this show up for you now as an entrepreneur? Because rumor has it, you left these corporate streets and now you're on your own. So what does that look like and how does that manifest? And I'm assuming that as a business owner, you are constantly navigating the short-term sacrifice, which sucks, over the long-term gain.
I take some issue with like the soft life theme because I'm like, well, first of all, what does that even mean? I mean, is it that you want to do less? And that's fine. But again, the people that do less either, for me, fall into one of two categories. They've either been born into a family that has enough money for them to do less, or they've worked so hard that they now have enough support system, money, finances, whatever it is, to then do less. You know, you kind of typically fall under one of two buckets, you know. And I think there are a lot of people that aim to have it, but then don't really understand what has to go in order to get there. Like you said, there's no conversation. And I don't think this is necessarily anybody's fault. I think part of it is because the world is quite a judgmental place. People don't want to share what they're going through when they're going through it. People will share once they feel comfortable. Then they'll reflect back and be like, okay, yeah, I had to go through some things to get here, you know? And even then, it depends on how much they feel happy to share, which is completely down to each individual person. And some people are like very, very private. So they don't actually have any desire to really share that publicly. Maybe they do with a handful of people that they really trust, but not with the world. So I think part of the issue, to go back to what you said before, is with the whole thing with social media, I think part of it is people are scared to be judged. So therefore they don't want to share, or they don't want to share until they feel more comfortable to do so. So then you have a whole generation of people that don't really understand that in order to, like you say, create that softness, you've got to do some stuff up front. You've got to go through some stuff up front, because how can you even define what soft means to you until you've experienced the hard stuff? I already know what I never want to experience in a company that I run, because I've worked in some places where I've experienced some crap, and I don't want that to ever happen for within a company, within the four walls that I'm responsible for. I don't want it to happen to people, but I would never have been able to say that unless I'd gone through it somewhere else. So in order to create whatever is your ideal, you have to go through some of the rough stuff. I feel like I've gone sideways through your question. What was the question again?
No, you've done a great job. The original question was, what does that look like today? What are some hardcore sacrifices that you're making in your company today in order to achieve one of the many long-term goals?
One of the biggest things is going from making a consistent salary a month to like not. It's honestly, the financial challenge is, for me, and I think for most entrepreneurs in general, that is the most challenging one, because you're not just having to make enough money to put into the business, you're having to make enough money to live, you know, and it's gone from, like, say, being consistent to being inconsistent. So then you're like, okay, how do I balance all of these different things? How do I find the time to run the business, but then also find the time to do things like consulting or mentoring or all those other things on the side that can generate the money that allow you to pursue the passion and the business that you're pursuing. For me, that's been the most challenging thing, especially as somebody who has always been very financially independent. So from the time I had my first job, my mum then said, cool, you're responsible for your phone bill, you're responsible for your hair, you're responsible for taking yourself out when you want to go out with your friends, you now have a job. She was like, I'll pay for
And Mama Jade was real. She said, don't to my paycheck.
Yeah, other than school. If it was anything to do with my education, then she paid for it. But if it wasn't that, it was like I paid for everything related to track, to get into track, for all of my kit, for my equipment, to pay to go into competitions, all of that. I had to do that from the age of like 16. So I was very used to, I go to work, I get paid, I manage my money, I'm good. You're going from that level of structure to, okay, so I've just finished doing some work, that invoice is 60-day terms, I'm going to get paid in 2 months, and then I have to figure out it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think financial stress can also cause like the most emotional and mental strain, because again, it creates so much uncertainty. And there's already a lot of uncertainty that happens within business anyway. So for me, the biggest sacrifice has been pretty much letting go and abandoning that structure of I work, I get paid at the end of every month. That by far has been like the biggest struggle. I think the second one has been, like I said, abandoning the vision of I can work part-time, because this is the first time working for myself is the first time that I have worked full-time hours. Now I still train. I found a way to make that work. But fundamentally, I'm kind of gone from, I want to say, maybe 25-hour weeks, 25 to 30-hour weeks to maybe like 50-hour weeks where I'm knocking out. And also I'm working across 2 time zones because half of my team are in the UK and half of them are in the States. So then it means like I'm up early, I'm out late. And it's just understanding how to manage my time and energy. When I first went full time, every 2.5 to 3 months, I would burn out. I would just be completely tapped out, and it would take a week for me to like really physically and emotionally recover. And then I would go at it again. And so I've had to find a way of creating a sense of balance, because otherwise your body just will tap out consistently. It's taken, I want to say, the best part of a year for me to be like, oh, I burnt out after 10 months. That's when I had my last bout of burnout. It was 10 months instead of 2.5. So I've managed myself better. It still happened, and it also wasn't as intense. So it's like understanding how to manage your energy, your time, your body. And then also, I think the last thing is your relationships. It's relationships with your friends, with your family. If you have a partner, with your partner, it's managing those expectations, because your priorities change. And people may still have the same expectations of you that they had before, but you may not be able to fulfill that, because actually a lot of your time, energy, and care is going into something that may not have fully materialized yet. And a lot of people find that difficult to understand, because it's not the life that the majority of people want to live. I went full time about 2 months after I got married. So I went from literally working a job that I knew and that I loved to transitioning into working on my business and like freelance consulting at the same time. Then like managing marriage, friendships, parents, siblings, like all of your relationships, the dynamic of them changes when you're focusing on your business. So it's also being cognizant of that, but being able to communicate that to people. Because I've had to say to some friends, you know what, I actually just can't be as present as I was before. And I don't know when that's going to change. Like that could change in a year, it could change in 5. I actually don't know. And it doesn't mean that you're not important to me anymore. It just means that if I'm the captain steering the ship, I have to make the time and effort and energy to do this properly. And that means that I'm not going to be as available. For me, those are the 3 biggest challenges. Like I said, it's finances, managing yourself, your time, your energy, and then also managing your relationships.
Tell me about picking the right partner. I always love this conversation within ambitious people, because in my very biased opinion, I think that picking the right partner is probably the most important decision you will ever make in your life, especially as women, because it's a man's world. They just pick differently. That's a separate episode. Maybe it's like Lexi After Dark. But especially when it comes to women, picking the right partner. Tell me more about that.
I think to pick the right partner, you also have to have done the work that you need to do on yourself, because a lot of people spend time, both men and women, being like, I want a person who's this. They have a shopping list of all the things that person needs to be. And my first question to them is like, okay, imagine that person has walked into the room. Great. Are you the kind of person that they would find attractive? Because if the answer is no, you have a problem. What work do you need to do on yourself so that if that is the right person for you, which half the time I don't think people actually envision what the right person is for them. If that is the right person, if they were to walk in the room and you say, oh, they're not going to look twice at me, you need to go do some work. And I honestly believe that the moment in which people tend to find their person is the moment that they are actually just focusing on trying to be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be.
Oh, they do. They do.
And by doing that internal work, you then attract different types of people. So I think that that's one of the biggest things. And the second thing is letting go of all of the stupidness that people believe that they need in a person.
Ooh.
Like I said, the shopping lists, I actually think that can be more restricting than helpful. Like, for example, I read a stat somewhere, and please don't hold me to this because I can't remember where I read it, but like something like 70% of women want a man that's over 6 foot tall, but like 25% of the men in the world are over 6 foot tall. I'm like, okay, the math doesn't really make sense. So does that mean that there's going to be a large percentage of women that are forever single because they're not going to get over the fact that they want a man that's 6 foot? People have these lists of things that they think they need. And I'm like, there's a fine line between a need and a want. If this person has an incredible personality, they are able to be emotionally present for you, they support you, they are able to hold their own, they have a wonderful family that's very welcoming, are you really going to say no because they're like 4 inches shorter than you would like them to be? If the answer is you're going to turn them away, I question that you have some work to do.
I think that a lot of people, like you said, they don't know what they need. They know what they want, but they don't know what they need. And that's a hard journey to go on, which is why I think everybody should date. Everyone, y'all need to be in these streets, okay? Because in the streets, just be healthy and don't do long-term decisions that like require you to be coupled to this person for life, even if you hate them, but be in the streets. Because it's sometimes hard with Western societal beauty standards and the whole PR campaign about like what is a good partner for you to actually understand what you need until you go out there and you play with that concept. At least for me, I remember when I was dating intentionally, I had to learn like what I need. I didn't necessarily know. I had my laundry list, and some of those things I knew that I needed because I was doing my work. But some of those things I didn't really know. I had an emotion of what I wanted to feel like, but I didn't know what that manifested and looked like in real time. And so I had to play with that and meet people who either do the exact opposite thing all the time or people who meet that need that I didn't know I needed until the need, popped up. But I think that's very important.
There are a lot of people that date for the sake of, they don't necessarily even have a reason. And it's like, don't waste your own time. Don't waste somebody else. It's better for you to spend that time working on yourself than to go out and date and do it unintentionally, because that's also how people end up in things like situationships, and people feel like they're being strung along, or they feel like they've been emotionally drained, or they feel like they're tapping out, because you need to walk in with intention. Because if you do, you're very quickly going to see what you are and you aren't prepared to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
And if that person happens to start behaving in a way you're like, oh, this is questionable, I don't feel like this is actually giving me what I require because I've already decided to date intentionally, that allows you to walk away from things that could be very painful quite quickly. It was actually quite funny because my husband and I, we met each other through a dating app, and we were both on the verge of like throwing the app in the bin because we've met so many people who were like, this is nonsense. When we spoke, we were both very upfront about what we wanted. I was like, look, I'm not interested in dating somebody for the sake of dating. I'm dating because in the long run, I want to be married. So if that's not the life that you want to live, you are fine to leave now. We'll say that we had a great time, you're a really nice person, but I'm not dating just because I want to be boyfriend and girlfriend. I'm actually not thinking that way at all. And it's not a disrespect to anybody that does think that way. That's just not what I've gone in with the intention of. And that allowed us to have a conversation about that, because very, very early on, like literally, I'm talking first few dates, we were having those conversations, so we understood what each other's intentions were. And I think there are a lot of people that are too nervous to have those conversations quite early because, oh, I don't want to scare the person off. But I'm like, but if they have the same intention or similar intentions, it's not going to scare them. It's actually going to be a relief to have those conversations sooner rather than later. But I think that people need to be much more upfront about their intentions. Don't hide them. Don't be scared at somebody. If somebody walks away after you've let them know what your intentions are, they weren't right for you anyway. Be prepared to do the work on yourself, and just understand that when you're looking for a partner and you know that you're super ambitious, I think the most important thing for me is having somebody that's supportive, that is ambitious themselves. They want things of their own outside of your relationship. That's great. But they're also just prepared to like back you when you need to be backed. They're prepared to be present for you when you need them to be present. I couldn't count the number of times like that my husband has dropped anything at a hat to come and do something that needs to be done or support me in a way that I just wouldn't have been able to get it done without him. And I know that I'm very lucky to have that, because not everybody has that. And he supports me wholeheartedly. We both run our own businesses. We are both very ambitious people. We both want to live a particular life in the long run. And we're doing that together, but we're also doing it through our own entities. And so I think one of the most important things is having somebody that can be a support system to you. And if you find that person, that is great. Also be mindful and cognizant of the fact you also have to treat them really well. Because good people who are a good catch, will have plenty of options.
And they know that. And they should know that. Also, just to add to the point about these 6'5" people, I think also people forget that I'm like, yo, if you want to have kids, then you got to carry that 6'5" man's baby.
Not to mention you then also have to feed them, because when they become teenagers and they're inhaling everything in the house.
Don't call me, because I'll be like, look at your man. This all tracks. But remember, this is what you wanted. It's what you asked for.
I think relationships, romantic ones, have a huge impact on your ability to build. They have a huge, arguably, it is the most important decision that you make.
With that said, reintroduce yourself to us. Who are you?
Oh, I am a woman that does many things. So I am Jade Buffong. I'm the founder of a beauty tech company called Main Hookup. We help people with textured hair find hairstylists they can trust in London and in New York. I am also an athlete, as I said. I am a stepmom. I am a wife. I am a problem solver, is how I describe myself. I like solving problems. I don't like complaining about things. Not that there's nothing wrong with having a complaint every now and then, but if you want to have a moan, I am not the person to come to. I'm the person to come to if you want a problem to be solved, because that's just how my brain works.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here.